Howdy, this is the Ginger Historian, and today I am going to be going over a topic that has been requested to me. And that topic is, what if Germany and the Axis powers won World War II? So this subject is actually very, very complex. Because if you look at our society today, everything we know of as Western civilization, and even Eastern civilization, happened because of World War II. And the outcomes of it, the winners. Soviet Russia, United States, Britain, France, etc., etc. Because after the war was over, Americans went over to Europe and Japan and reshaped them. Now, I can't go over what happened in Japan and how we shaped there, because I'm sure there's a letter that starts with an H that we kind of started over there. Well, not a letter, a word that starts with an H. And its non-deformed brother is called anime. That should put enough into your heads to think of what we brought over there. Anyway, we're not talking about over there yet, we're talking about over in Europe. So we went over there and we established and industrialized that part of Europe. We brought over our ideals and our culture into Western Europe. And the Cold War happened, all because of what happened in World War II. So let's say we wipe the slate clean. Almost clean. It's 1945, Reich doesn't fall. It actually succeeds. It takes over France, takes over the western half of Russia, so all the major part, basically. Norway, England, etc., etc. And America can't get over, so the Reich wins. Germany wins. What happens next? Well, to understand that, we need to understand what the Germans wanted, what the Nazi ideology was about. And I know it's a buzzword, but it's what they were, so it's what I'm going to call them. The Nazi ideology was all about service to the state. Anything that was in the way of that, gone. Religion, other races, gone. And it was also based off of a genetic hierarchy. And if you were not in this hierarchy, you were to be eliminated. Now, there was a certain ladder in the hierarchy of races. So at the very top, you had the Aryan race. The Aryan race were what Hitler considered pure Germans. Blonde hair, blue eyes, the works. They were at the top. Under that, you had the Western Europeans, such as France, Netherlands, Nordic races, some Nordic races anyway, and Irish, England. All those were considered Western Europeans, and they were right under the Aryans. They were still respected, not as much as Aryans. Along with that, actually, we get the Chinese and Japanese, who Hitler even stated that they were to be considered honorary Germans. Under the Western Europeans, you have the Mediterraneans. These are your Italians, Spaniards, Greeks, the Tanner Europeans. He considered these lazy, because Rome didn't exist. Neither did the Greek Empire. So apparently they were lazy. I don't know what his thinking was, but they were lazy to him. And he thought that they were to be basically tolerated in the beginning. Later on, they'd be weeded out by probably mass extermination. And under that, at the very, very bottom, you had the Untermensch. The Untermensch, if my German is correct there, were your Slavs, Russians, Poles, Ukrainians, your Jews, disabled people, homosexual people, anything like that, gone. Down syndrome, autistic, any of that is Untermensch. They were to be eliminated right off the spot. They were considered either not worthy to live or dangerous to the Nazi cause. So they would be eliminated first. in the first stages of the plan. In Hitler's plan, he wanted Lebensraum, or living space, for Germany. To do this, he wanted to clean out the Slavs. So he took, I'm going to use this as an example, so say you have Germany here, he went this way to the east where Russia and Ukraine and all that are, and invaded it. So let's say he won. He succeeded in pushing the Russians back to the Siberia, Ural Mountains, all that. All that's left here is some base Eastern Europeans, such as the Poles and the Ukrainians. First thing he would do is eradicate them. That goes first. Eradicate the Slavs, enslave them, mass genocide. He said his goal was to kill 50 million. Yeah, he had a goal of how many he wanted to kill. So he succeeds. Now what? Well, once he killed that many, he thought that that area, that rural farmland, where it was actually really good to grow stuff, would be used for colonization. Germany people would come from Germany and go to Ukraine or Poland. They'd inhabit it, farm it, and spread the Aryan race. Purebred Aryan mothers would not be allowed to have abortions, while Slavs would be mandatory to have abortions. The only way that you could live as a Slav is if you were a woman and you decided you were going to basically have kids with a pure Aryan male to weed out the Slavic genes down the line. That is the only way you could live. Anything else, you'd be enslaved or genocided. So after that happened, he would then turn his attentions to Western Europe. Western Europe wouldn't be that much of an issue because he considered them of a higher standing, right below Germans, pure Aryans. So he didn't want to genocide them. Instead, he'd send people over there to help, convert it, and any form of rebellion would be met with entire towns being burned down, which we actually did see in Poland. That's what would take place in Western Europe. Western Europe you'd play favorites with, while with Italy and the Mediterranean states and countries, he would just blow them off. So after he pacifies the Western Europeans and turns them German, and colonizes the East, what's next in his plan would be to eliminate religion. He considered religion to be... He called people who were religious slaves. He said they were slaves for believing, and it made them too merciful. So he would burn Catholic ministries, anything that was religion-based. Jews, we saw them get eradicated right off the bat. And anything Christian or any religion would be eradicated. Now, I bet you're probably thinking, if you know some basic stuff about the German ideology in World War II, you're probably thinking, hold on a second. Didn't they say that they were Christian? And you'd be correct. They did say that. But they weren't. Hitler and the higher Nazi officials, they knew that their ultimate goal was to get rid of religion as one of their goals. So they put on a front to maintain an alliance with Italy, because you got to remember, in Italy, you had the Vatican, the Pope, most powerful man in the world, religious, right-hand man to God. So he had to basically say, yeah, we're Christian, Jesus and stuff. So he did, to satisfy and put a sort of backing into his movement. Although anyone who was in the higher standings was atheist, Heinrich Himmler even said that we live in a race or an age where Christianity is one of the biggest evils. And that's Heinrich Himmler. the butcher saying that Christianity is evil. So after this, we have a Europe that is non-religious, entirely Aryan, and at a cultural divide between the Mediterraneans and the Aryans. And this would happen within the course of around 3 decades at the most. Now, what about the rest of the world? Well, it's hard to depict what America would do. America, we did have a good amount of Germans in our population. Now, would they agree with this? Probably not, because they're in America, and they would see that going on over there, and they're probably distance themselves from it. Or they would try to. You would have a lot of people in America attacking those Germans, calling them Nazis, even though they weren't taking part of it. That's just what happens. And it's sad, but it's true. Another thing that would happen with the Americas is, and this is largely up for debate, I think that we would basically we would pull ourselves out of the situation and watch, and sadly be forced to watch, what happens in Europe. Because we went over there, we started a war, and America didn't really want to get into another war after World War II. I know you may be thinking, oh, well, what about Vietnam, Korea, communism? Well, you gotta remember, we only fought communism because we thought communism was more evil than fascism, actually. We thought communism was much worse, which, to each their own, maybe it was. And it could be seen as worse. That's a matter of opinion. So we wouldn't do much. We would sit and watch as our former allies get turned into fascists. Whether by their own free will or by being forced into it. Now let's look at what goes on in the East, in Asia. So in Asia, you had the Japanese Empire. So with the Axis powers winning, there are 2 things that could happen. One, it gets turned into an American colony. No explanation there. We basically dropped the bombs again, just like we did in our timeline. And Japan is like, oh, we're gonna go from samurai to cat girls now. So that is one thing that could happen, and it could be one of the last, it would be seen as one of the last bastions of democracy in that part of the world, off the coast of America. Because the Canadian government is basically what that's another thing that now that it comes to my mind, if you don't know, I don't write scripts for this, I just talk. So now that I'm thinking about it, Canada would most likely become the British government in exile, basically. The British royal family would probably retreat to Canada and make their own government there, and that would be basically New Britain. Still be Canada, but it would be New Britain. So just to answer any questions there, that's what would happen, most likely. So Japan would be seen, if it was an American colony, would be seen as the last shining light of democracy on that side of the world. Because now you have Germany and Europe and Chinese communists in China. It'd be a mess. Now let's say that America pulls out of the war completely. Doesn't fight Japan, just backs out after Germany wins and kind of sits back. Do I think this will happen? Probably not. I think the other timeline where we keep on attacking Japan is most likely. But let's say that this happens. This is a video just dedicated to plain thought, what would happen. So, what would happen if we pulled out of the war completely? Well, the Japanese Empire would continue its rampage in Eastern Asia, invading Korea, China, Mongolia, maybe even going down to Vietnam. Just invading all of those, committing genocides, and basically, if you've seen what happened in the earlier days of the Japanese Empire before World War II, it'd be that on a much, much larger scale. mass killings, genocide, enslavement, work camps, all to fuel the Japanese Empire. And now China would probably be able to fight them back, because China is China, and it has the biggest population. So they would most likely be able to fight the Japanese back for some time. Do I think that they've held out for too long? Yes, actually. I think they'd be able to hold the Japanese back on the Korean Peninsula. They would actually probably push the Japanese back like halfway to the Korean Peninsula, instead of seeing the Korean North and South Korea like we do today, with South being democratic and North being communist. We'd see the North still be communist with the Chinese government, but in the South, we'd see the Japanese government, and we'd have a whole new Korean War. That's what I would think would happen. And from there, it gets really hazy and unpredictable. So I'm going to stop there for today. Today I've gone over what I believe would happen in the events of Germany winning the World War II. Now, this is only my opinion. You are entitled to your own thoughts. I would love to hear some of your thoughts of what would happen in the comments below. Please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.